Hey, everybody, this is Steve Levitt, and I was an actor you probably have seen a gazillion times, and then I wrote many things. And Sean is brilliant and asked me to come on Second Acts, and I hope you'll listen to it because we had a lot of fun.
Wait a second. Hold on. Let's try something different.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now that's what I'm talking about. This is episode 9 of Second Acts podcast featuring the South Louisiana music legend Kyper. We'll be back right after this.
Hey everyone, David Wagner here, host of Addictions, the podcast about addictions. I wanted to let you all know about my weekly podcast, Addictions. Each week I bring you interviews with recovering addicts, information about topics related to addiction, and much, much more. You can find Addictions on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you find podcasts. Just search for the word Addictions or visit addictionspodcast.wordpress.com. Again, that's addictionspodcast.wordpress.com. Thanks, and remember, never quit quitting.
To grow up in Baton Rouge during the late 80s and early 90s is to have a copy of Kyper's Dangerous cassette pass across your boombox at some point. In a city so strangely devoid of musical artists to call its own, Kyper was a hometown hero to many. In fact, Kyper was a special hero of mine because it was always rumored that he worked at a local auto parts store, which just happened to be right across the street from the Kmart I worked at in high school. Something about the thought of being able to look across that parking lot and know that greatness lied just beyond the hot, cracked asphalt of Florida Boulevard gave hope to this teenage Kmart associate. I remember listening to immensely danceable and hummable songs like Conceited and Ecstasy, and wondering how this guy wasn't nationally known. As it turned out, Kyper would eventually score a hit with his 1990 single Tic-Tac-Toe, which reached number 14 on Billboard's Hot 100 chart. Even still, Kyper deserves much more attention for his contributions to the electronic dance scene. One need only watch Kyper's Tic-Tac-Toe video to see his sharp dress, good looks, and electric dance moves that are such a doppelganger for 1990s Bobby Brown. Just don't Google his video for Spin the Bottle. No, seriously, trust me. That black thong Kyper, really? Anyway, pull up your Z Cavaricis, strap on your roller skates, and get ready to be transported back to an awesome time as Kyper joins us on Second Acts.
Call is now being recorded.
Hey, we're joined on the show today by musical artist Kyper. How you doing, Kyper?
Doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm great.
Good.
Do I refer to you as Kyper, or is there a name you prefer to be referred to by?
Oh, well, it just depends on where I'm at, man. When I'm in Rome, I do as the Romans, but what I'm known as for doing the music is Kyper, so, and that's my real name, so we just stick with that.
All right, we'll just roll with that then. So I want to start off the show by asking you about an old Baton Rouge urban legend that has been around for a long time. Did you actually work at Hilo Auto Parts back in the day?
Of course. Yeah, I sure did. That is true.
That's true. Right. That's awesome. That is the
and I was still there when I first went on tour. I took a leave of absence and I stayed with them. They kept my position, so I just rolled with the flow, man. I used to bring the bus over there and we park in the parking lot and have a good time.
There just seems to be so few well-known musical artists in and around the Baton Rouge area that the city could actually call their own. At least prior to the 1990s, that's changed quite a bit now that we have some fairly prominent hip-hop artists in the area. I can remember a couple people, John Fred of John Fred and the Playboys, maybe local blues legend Tabby Thomas. So knowing that there was a dearth of musical influences in the area, who were your influences coming up?
Right. Well, for starters, in the Baton Rouge area, we had a lot of artists that came out of Baton Rouge that actually made influences nationally and internationally. I was schooled by a record shop owner where I grew up. Was the name of it was Bowie's Record Shop and Buddy's Rock Shop. And both of them gave me a lot of history. Also, Gonzalez Music Wholesale, which a lot of people don't know, we had a major music distributor out of Louisiana, which was right there in Gonzalez, Louisiana. But they informed me, growing up, I learned about Joe Tex, which Joe Tex is an artist that was similar to James Brown. And if you look up the history of any of Joe Tex music, James Brown actually, from what I was told, Joe Tex was before James Brown. He actually got some of his style from Joe Tex. We had Percy Sledge. Matter of fact, John Fred, you mentioned him. I had the privilege of meeting him because of the booking agent that I had before he died. And man, we've had a lot of artists that came out of the Baton Rouge area that really made an impact on the industry. Before the rap, we also had a guy named he had a studio called Bluff Road Studios, and he played bass. Harold Coward, he played the bass for the Bee Gees. So, and he was also a writer for some of the Bee Gees music. So a lot of these legends I met along the way, along with some of the blues legends. I also spent a lot of time in Jackson, Mississippi. I know we said that, that I was born and raised in Baton Rouge, but I also spent a lot of time in Jackson, Mississippi. And when I went there, I learned a lot of the history, not only about the musicians from Jackson, but also just in the South in general. And when they found out I was from Baton Rouge, they also gave me history of those artists as well. So that was kind of like a catalyst, just coming out of the Baton Rouge area. Those are some of the ones that I knew of, from Percy Sledge to Joe Tex. Man, there's so many more. I mean, that's a question that, there are a few more that I just can't recall off the top, but we do have a history just coming out of Baton Rouge where we have artists that have made impact nationally and internationally.
Yeah, I can't believe I left Percy Sledge off the list. That is almost criminal.
When I'm made in love with one, got to have that in there, baby. Got to have it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, all these names that you're mentioning, they all play various styles of music, but none of them are playing the style of music that you play. So there must be somebody nationally, internationally that you're influenced by. So who kind of has opened the door for you and got you?
Music? Definitely. I know a lot of people compare me to Egyptian Lover, but there's a history there that we can get into a little bit later. But growing up, I started performing early at an early age, and I started performing like around 5, and just entertaining all the way through as a dancer, DJ, drummer because I played in a band. But my influences coming up was at some point I started touring, and I was in a Broadway play. And let's see, I would say one of my first influences would definitely be Prince. Matter of fact, I had the privilege of meeting Prince and meeting the Time Band when they were on tour. I think it was one of his first 2 tours. And I would say one of my larger influences for my style, Prince on the creativity. I really admired his creativity and his ability to take different genres of music and just put his creativity in it. When I met Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who actually produced the Time Band, and they had some of the influence with Prince as well, when I met them I was still in school when I met them. I think I was still in just about to get in high school. And when I met Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, they gave me a bit of advice that pretty much walked me through what I wanted to do. You know, they basically kind of groomed me into how, or gave me advice on how I should, you know, captivate my own style or my own spin on something that I like to do and, you know, that I felt the most. And one of those was Roger Troutman. I don't know if you're familiar with Roger Troutman, but that electronic voice that he had with his music, I grew up listening to that. And he was also on the record label, the major record label that I always wanted to. Atlantic was the hottest record label back then, signing all the acts. And another one was Peter Frampton, because my father would DJ, and he would play music from Peter Frampton, Roger Troutman, and the Bar-Kays. So that singing style, that southern singing style that I gravitated towards was from the Bar-Kays, but the electronic voice and the rap style was more from, I'd say, either, you know, the electric voices of either Peter Frampton or Roger Troutman, more so Roger Troutman.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, you know, kind of mixing the rap style of, you know, everybody had that slow rap back then. Of course, Egyptian Lover was doing it as well. We just didn't have anybody from the South that was actually doing the kind of electro rap, so to speak. African Bambaataa is definitely another one. I would say African Bambaataa and Kraftwerk were a huge influence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I had to actually narrow it down, definitely, because they were, Kraftwerk was one of that was actually the first. As somebody who was a b-boy back in that day, I would have to say Kraftwerk. When I first heard Numbers, man, I just went crazy. I was like, this is unbelievable. So, yeah, I'd have to put it on that style.
Okay. And you mentioned, obviously, you've had the comparison by You're on a Mission to Egyptian Lover, but that seems kind of like a sore spot for you. Or is that an influence that you're not keen to be, you know, compared with, or there seems to be a little bit of a story behind that?
No, there's no sore spot there. Either of our friends, you know, back when we first started touring together, we had some sore bumps there, but it was a DJ that was kind of instigating everything. So once we found out that particular DJ was instigating everything, we actually got to be really good friends. You know, we toured together, done shows together. I think it's more so the public, you know, doing some type of comparison. During that time, you know, when Egypt came out with his style independently, we were doing things in the South. We were on that hip hop style, but people just didn't realize it. You know, we didn't have the notoriety because we were from the South. All of the labels on all the action was either on the East Coast or the West Coast. As a matter of fact, there's a documentary coming out sometime in 2018, and they're actually talking about Baton Rouge rappers, and they're giving me a lot of props as being the first rapper / club artist to break from the Baton Rouge area, because I don't just do the electro hip hop rap. I mean, I don't just do the electro hop rap, but I can actually rap too. So, you know, I got credit for being the pioneer, one of the pioneers out of Baton Rouge. So that's a good thing. It's funny you mentioned about Egypt though, but no, we don't have any issues. There's no beef there. No.
Well, good. Well, that seems to be a well-earned reputation based on your, you know, what you've given to the Baton Rouge club scene. You mentioned being early on involved in drama, and that's interesting to me because I noticed Kyper is a variation on your last name, but there seems to be maybe a fictional character that you've created, a Kyper character. Is that true?
I don't know. Where did you get that one from?
Well, I just in a few of your songs, you speak with a British voice. You know, you talk in a robot voice, like you've mentioned. A lot of your themes deal with outer space and you know, technology and things like that. So, and also your name, you've kind of altered the spelling somewhat of your name. So, I didn't know if you created a sort of alter ego character for your music, or if you know, you're just kind of one and the same with the music that you create.
Nah, I just pretty much go with the flow. I think you're speaking of one of the first songs I released, which was Conceited, and it had that British sounding accent on the front.
Right.
It was just when the track was coming together, it was just the mode that I was in. Being exposed to a lot of different things at that time. I don't know how that happened, but I guess when I was writing the track, I thought of conceitedness coming from the British era. You know, when I would think of the British speaking accent, it was more of a prestigious type of air with that content. So to give it that flair on the beginning of the song, I was with the engineer, and when I did it, everybody went crazy. So we just stuck with that. But it worked out. It was really the perfect intro for the record. So it gave it that charisma that it needed, and it gave it that energy to set the pace for the rest of the song.
Hi, aren't you Kyper?
Yes, and who are you?
Well, you don't know me, but...
But you're wasting my time. Okay, chops, give me the bait. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And before we move into the Atlantic years, I want to ask you about some of those cuts off of the Dangerous album. We talked about Conceited, which was, I told you, my favorite song on the album. How did the song come about? Was it built around the very unique, almost Asian-sounding keyboard riff, or was there another inspiration for the song?
I would say there were several different influences that helped to create that song. I know prior to that, I was working in a studio in Baton Rouge, and I was working on a different song. So actually, it was going to be called La Belle Future, which was it was going more towards a Frenchy type atmosphere, but wow, man, you taking me way back. You really jogging my memory here. I remember being I actually started back in those days, everybody had these different crews. They had these hip-hop crews, and there was some local guys from the area where I'm from. You know, we were all kids, and we started this group called the Fuji Crew. And because we just like they had crews in New York and California, we had crews down here. And I remember, I guess it came up from either from the guys, guys trying to have that suave looking look, and that was part of it. And then there were different variations. My father was in a fraternity. He was a Kappa, and the Kappas would always do the "Yo, baby, yo," and that's where I got that line from. And man, there was a lot of different things that built into that. But it was just the energy in the studio, man. It took off. It took off initially. Really took off when we got in the studio. I met up with engineer William Brown. As a matter of fact, it won an award that year for the best engineered record. It was the year in '88. I won Jackson Music Awards Best New Artist of the Year. And it was just the energy when William Brown and I got together on the mix down, and there was another engineer that we had two engineers, one named Francois. You mentioned the Asian riff. I had an Asian looking girlfriend, and I guess he kind of put that little riff in there. And he was like, "Yeah, I played it because there were a lot of other parts to the track that didn't really make it on the song." Because back then we were recording in like 48 track studios. So I remember when I laid when I did that little Asian part, that little Asian walk to it. He liked it a lot, and he's like, they kept convincing me, you need to leave that in there, because these guys were older, but they were seasoned, even though they were engineers, they were seasoned musicians as well, and they felt, they helped me to feel the movement of the song, so that they thought that was a good part to put in there in that breakdown. But that's where the Asian part came from.
Okay. Well, on that note, your recordings sound pretty like they're complex productions, a lot of layers, audio panning, samples, things like that. Are you the primary producer of your music, or what is the recording process like for you back then and now?
Well, I've always been the primary producer. I have more hands-on. I've learned a lot. Like I said, William Brown was really my teacher. He was the guy. He was the engineer that mixed for the Barcades. All of the Barcades albums that you ever heard on the radio, you ever bought in a music store, was William Brown was the engineer. If you look on the back of the albums, you'll see his name. You'll see his name on the back of my albums. He worked with Paisley Park. He worked with Prince. He's worked with a lot of artists in the industry. He was a major engineer in Memphis, Tennessee, when Ardent Recording Studios was very popular. I mean, 3-6 Mafia has been through there. A lot of popular artists have been through there. REM, and just to answer that question, producer-wise, I was always the lead producer, but I was an open producer to whereas if I was collaborating or working with someone else in the studio and there was a certain energy that was flowing, and they came up with an idea, or we collaborated and just something sounded right. Well, it was on the final part of it was my call. But if it was something that really sounded good, I wasn't going to turn it down. But at this point now, from learning from those guys back then coming up, from like William Brown and all that, and William told me, he said one day there's going to be a day when you'll be able to. He told me just like this. He said you're in a prime position because there's going to be a day when the digital scene is going to come in, and you're going to have an advantage because you're going to know the analog, and he said the ambition you have, you're going to learn the digital, and he said you're going to benefit a lot from it because you'll be able to downsize and actually have a good ear from both sides of it. And when I look back now, some years later, I see what he was talking about. And now at this point, there's some tracks that I do. I go in the studio. I don't have to have anybody. I can actually do it from the recording, from laying the track, the writing, all the way up to the mix down. I mean, I could do all the parts. And that was one of the influences that I got from Prince. Sometimes Prince would, William was the one that convinced me to put a studio in my home. The first house I bought, and he convinced me. He said, "Man, you living in this house, you by yourself. You got these rooms. You need to put your studio in one of these rooms, and you will be able to just wake up out of sleep and create something. And if you felt like it, work on it from beginning to end." And when I read about Prince, he would do things like that. He had a studio. He had 24/7 access to a studio, and I never really knew the importance of that until William Brown kind of convinced me to do it. So that has a lot to do with to answer your question. Yeah, at this point, I can pretty much do a track from beginning to end and do every aspect of it.
You've got a couple songs with some great electric guitar riffs on them. Is that you playing the instrument, or is that someone else?
No, that's me on What Gets Your Body Hype Ecstasy. On Acid Man, that is actually Barry Email. That's my guitar player. Barry's a bad dude. We've been playing together. Ooh, man, he's actually before we got the Kyper band. Barry and I were together before we actually got the band together, because I played in several bands as a drummer, and but Barry was the one that actually got me going on the guitar. But he is my teacher. So that's him on Acid Man. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, that's some pretty impressive stuff, and to know that you're not only the voice behind Kyper, but quite a few of the instrumentals on some of these classic songs is pretty amazing stuff. Speaking about Ecstasy, which is another legendary club staple of the area, I watched one of your 2012 performances at the Hollywood Casino in Baton Rouge, which is on YouTube, and you were sort of discussing maybe the interpretation of the song Ecstasy, and it almost seemed like it may not be on the surface what a lot of people would think it's about. Sort of like you left the door open to what it could mean. Maybe it has multiple meanings. What was the idea behind Ecstasy, and what exactly does it mean?
Well, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Because I don't stay in the box. So, we knew we were kind of touching on the edge of things when writing the song, but we wanted to do it in a way the lyrics would be catchy to where the listener would use his own imagination. So if you were in the Lollapalooza atmosphere, then that's what you would get from it. If your thing was, if it was a sexual gesture to you, then that's what you got from it. But overall, we got into a lot of controversy behind that, but it also got more momentum for the actual song itself. And, I would always protect myself with a shield is, hey, the dictionary says ecstasy is a good feeling. So regardless of whatever your mindset is, this is what it is. And we actually do that in the show, and it goes over very well. We let the audience use their imagination for what they got out of the feeling from it. So that's where we go. I won't just actually get into a box on it because I didn't, but it was at a time when a lot of things were taboo, and we actually touched on that taboo. It's actually got notoriety as being the first song that made any kind of reference towards, ecstasy. Some people said ecstasy as the drug, and some people said ecstasy as sex, and some people said ecstasy as, hey, it's just a good feeling. So it's an open book. It's out of the box.
Ecstasy. 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 I got something new, just for you. It's something that'll make you dance and wanna boogaloo. It ain't like cocaine and it ain't like marijuana. You say you like to dance, well baby you're gonna get on the floor, shake like never before. I wanna see you rock, I wanna see you roll. No need to hide it, we can divide it. Let's take a double charge. You get it, I got it. What gets your body high? Ecstasy, ecstasy. What makes you dance all night? Ecstasy, ecstasy. What gets your body high? Ecstasy, ecstasy. What makes you dance all night? Ecstasy, ecstasy.
Hey everyone, I'm Joanna.
And I'm Nate, and we are Stranger Than.
We discuss a variety of mysterious topics, ranging from historic events to present-day urban myths and legends.
Please join us. Look up Stranger Than Podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and most other of your favorite places to get podcasts. Also check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/StrangerThanPodcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Gets your body high, ecstasy, ecstasy. What makes you dance all night, ecstasy, ecstasy. What gets your body high, ecstasy, ecstasy. What makes you dance all night, ecstasy.
Now, At some point, you've alluded to being courted by a number of record labels, and you ultimately wound up on Atlantic. What was that process like, and why did you choose Atlantic?
The process was pretty, being out of Louisiana, the process was very rigorous. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten on the label had there not been the momentum from the music that was being put out. That would have never happened coming out of Louisiana. It's not like I was I was in those areas. I wasn't in New York a lot, mingling with these labels. I wasn't in California mingling with them. So, and it wasn't like I was exposed to them. So that was a pretty rough atmosphere. But I chose Atlantic. I wanted to be on Atlantic more than any of the other labels because as I was growing up and dancing and performing, I performed in a lot of these areas. I just wasn't networking with the labels. But in traveling and performing, all of the hit records were coming out on Atlantic Records. And I just pretty much put two and two together. My thing was, at that time, since Atlantic Records is putting out all the hits, then they have the capabilities of getting the exposure that I would, if I'm going to do this, because my thing was underground. I stayed underground for the longest, and I was content there. I was content with doing club records because even though my relatives and friends basically thought that the music was only local, I knew that the music was international because I had friends that were in the military, and they would travel, and they would call me back and say, "Hey, man, do you know they're playing your song over here in Germany? Do you know they're playing your songs over here in the UK or in Asia?" So I was getting the reports. So on an import level, our music was out there. But I chose Atlantic because we knew that if I could get with Atlantic, then that would be a game changer for getting the recognition coming out of the South that I actually always wanted to make happen.
Now, you may have to check my math, or you may want to add some additional figures to this, but the album Tic Tac Toe, which you're referring to on the major label Atlantic, produced your biggest hit, which was the single Tic Tac Toe, and the album sold over 1 million copies over the summer of 1990. Was the 82nd best-selling album of the year, and the single Tic Tac Toe reached all the way up to 14th on the singles chart. Does that about cover it?
Yeah, there's also a dance chart. There was a dance chart. It hit number 8. I think it hit number 8 on the dance chart. Or I may be thinking about Ecstasy because a lot of people don't know that What Gets Your Body High, Ecstasy, hit the Billboard chart as well. But it was only on the dance chart that it hit the Billboard. But it hit number 14 with a bullet, and to this date, it's in Billboard's history of hits, top history of hits, because it went to number 14, but it had a bullet. If you knew anything about reading the Billboard charts back then, songs that were still climbing up the charts had an oval circle around the number. If it didn't have an oval circle around the number, that meant that it had peaked and it was going to eventually come back down. So at this late date, I can share some of the politics with you. I can't share it all because I kind of got a gag on me. But that bullet around the number represents that it was going higher. Tic Tac Toe was actually going to be a number 1 record. Now, if you look at how long it holds the record for holding number 14 longer than any other record in history. It stayed there over 25 weeks. That with a bullet, not just 25 weeks just sitting there. It sat there with a bullet, but it never went any higher. So there was something that was going on behind the scenes with these record labels that helped to build records. But I didn't play into the game. I'm just going to say it that way. We didn't play it because it wasn't just me. We didn't play into everything the way they wanted us to play into it. Therefore, the record was strong enough, and it was actually a true hit record carrying its own with that sample riff of On of a Lonely Heart. But the record was actually going to be a number 1 record. And with it being at number 14 with that bullet, that's the proof that it was definitely climbing. It was definitely a choice to climb, and it was doing it on its own, but they held it back. So it stayed there. I'm glad that happened, though, because everybody that's in the industry, a lot of the old heads and some of the new people that I've met in the industry, when they bring up tic-tac-toe, that's one of the first things they catch. And they go, man, what in the hell was going on that your record stayed at number 14 with a bullet for over 25 weeks?
Tic-tac-toe, of course, was the big single from the album Tic-tac-toe, and there's a video that accompanied the song. What do you remember about the filming of the music video?
Ooh. Wow. Man, you're really jogging that memory. I remember being on tour. We were on tour, and we were in Daytona, Florida. Atlantic Records didn't want to do a video with Kyper or with us because they were, for some reason, I guess they still hadn't quite they still weren't quite giving us the respect that that they were giving all of these other artists from these other areas. You know, if you were from California or you were from New York, the minute you put the record out, you had a video to accompany the song from the beginning. So a lot of times on MTV or whatever, back then we had the box, you would see the video before you even heard the song. But when it came to them signing Kyper as a first-time act out of Baton Rouge or out of Louisiana or from the South, as they looked at it, they put a stipulation that we had to reach a certain quota in sales before they would even consider doing the video. Well, we went along with it because we knew the strength in the record, because we were communicating with people not only in the United States but outside the country. So we had more confidence in the record than they did. But anyway, the reason why it happened while we were on tour is because of that particular that stipulation they put in the agreement. And when the record sales reached that number that we had to reach, then Atlantic contacted us on the road and said, hey, look, you reached the quota. You need to get a video shot. We need to get the video done. And I didn't want them to have a large budget video. You know, we were keen enough to know what they were trying to do. They were trying to bring us in New York to shoot the video, and the video, the amount that we were going to be charged through the royalties was going to be off the roof. So we basically said, hey, we're going to shoot a video. You're going to catch us while we're on the road. And it was pretty cool because they didn't have a script, and we wrote the script back and forth between the publicist in New York with Atlantic, the PR rep there, and between us on the bus. And it was really cool. We got everybody involved. We had the band and everybody involved at that time. And we wrote the script, and they flew the video people into Daytona the next day. They flew them in and set up the stage and everything. And we were doing a concert there in Daytona that night at a place called the Coliseum. And if there's anybody that's listening to the podcast from Daytona, then they'll remember that night. But it was a really fun night. We shot the video live at a concert, and we gave it that real feel. You know, I didn't want to come up with some off the wall storyline, you know. But everything that you saw in the video, it all happened on the spot. From the dancers, from the girls in the video. We went to the mall. We went to the mall before the show and got girls that wanted to be in the video, and it went like that.
Is there a push now that you're on this major label, Atlantic, and this is kind of your first the first glimpse of Kyper, not just hearing the music, but people worldwide seeing the image along with the music. Was there pressure that you put on yourself, or was there pressure from the music label to have a certain image, wear certain clothes, have a certain concept for the video?
They definitely put pressure on me to change my sound. They wanted me to come out of the club sound and go more top 40. They wanted me to change up and do certain things. The bed scene in Tic-tac-toe, that wasn't my idea. That was their idea. That was the label's idea. There's a lot of things that they were doing at the time. During that time, they wanted to push through media. I hope I don't get in trouble with that, but they wanted to push interracial involvement. So we had, actually on the beginning of the video, you see the black girl in a polka dot dress. And that's who was actually going to be in the bed scene. Well, all of a sudden when we were filming, we get a phone call from Atlantic because the video director is reporting everything that's going on back to the publishers at Atlantic. And they go, hey, he's got this scene, this is how it's going. And next thing I know, I've got a road manager walking up to me saying, hey, Atlantic wants you to change it. They want you to do the bed scene this way, and they want this and that. And I was like, hey man, that don't happen down here, man. That kind of stuff. They said, no, man, we're getting ready. They want you to do it, man. It's gonna be the right thing to do. They're getting ready. They want to change that. You got to realize you're an international artist now, and it's not just that and blah. So on one hand, I think some things were good, and on the other hand, I think some things cost us. We started doing interviews a certain way I wanted to dress. Then I get a phone call from the publicist. Oh, the publicist thinks you should put this on and you should do that and that kind of thing. So yeah, there was definitely pressure there, because at that point they have their money invested. So some of it, I think they're genuinely trying to, they'll sit down at a board meeting and they're genuinely trying to be strategic in marketing. But on some things, I think they're trying to use you as a tool as a media tool for influence in the public, so to speak. So I had to be cautious in those areas.
Well, if any listeners haven't seen the video, you have to go check it out. It's a great artifact from a period of time, the 90s. It's a really fun video, and you have some amazing dance moves, so it's worth the price of viewing for that alone. But it's a great video. Everyone should really go check it out right now if you haven't seen it already.
Oh man, thank you, man. That was the way we line danced back then. That was a little tic-tac-toe dance. And by the way, there's no way that I can do a show. Any show that we do, if we forget to do those moves, there's somebody in the audience that pretty much threatens us if we don't do those moves before. They don't care how old we are. If we don't do those moves before we get off stage, they will not let us leave.
The main hook of the single Tic-Tac-Toe, of course, is the instrumental sample from the band Yes's Owner of a Lonely Heart. What gave you the idea to build a song around this, and did you run into any legal issues with the sample so prominent in the song?
One of my keyboard, he was a keyboard player and a guitar player. We were on the road gigging somewhere, and the way it came about, we would, me DJing, they knew that, the big thing back then was doing mashups. So I had a beat, and in the keyboard, he had the riff from Owner of a Lonely Heart in the keyboard. He had it all loaded up, and back then sampling was the big thing. But everybody couldn't really put a sample together and make it mesh into a song. Everybody didn't really have that net to be able to truncate it right, get the rhythm right on time to where it synced up just right. And if I remember correctly, we were doing a gig and we had the beat on. We were doing a sound check, and all of a sudden he hit this key where the sample was, and it hit that, and I screamed. I said, "Whoa! Stop! What was that? What was that? What? Stop! How'd you do that, brother?" So we got back over there, and he's laughing. He's like, "Oh man, I was just messing around, man. I hit the button and I hit the sample." And he had it as a loop in his track, and he was going to surprise me that night in the middle of the show. And basically what happened is, from there, I said, man, I like that. I always really did like that song. I was always crazy about that song, Owner of a Lonely Heart. I said, man, I'm going to make a song out of that. He was like, really? You think so? He's like, man, that's going to be hard to do, man. You're going to botch that song up. He's like, you're going to mess that song up, man. That's a classic. I said, no, dude, I'm going to write a kick-ass song to this riff. And he's like, all right, go for it. So, make a long story short, from there, man, I went to work, man, and the drum programming was where I felt a lot of it needed to be. I wanted to put the electro the electro. I wanted to have that mesh, that fusion, because that was a big thing. It's still a big thing with DJs now to be able to take songs and mesh different styles. And I just kept working on it, man. I remember working on it, man, for over like 2 weeks, like a 2-week period. And I was in the studio and I did the track. I left it in overnight, and I was sharing a studio with another guy. As a matter of fact, he's a hit producer out of Baton Rouge too. He's done a lot of rap and jig tracks. A guy named Shantae. As a matter of fact, if anybody listened to some of the rap tracks, man, I can't really get into all the names, but the jig music, he on the beginning of the track, he'd say, Shantae on the track. Well, we had a studio together in Baton Rouge, and I left a track in there overnight, and you mentioned about being able to go in at any time of night. We both had keys to the studio, and we would do that sometimes. We would leave certain things up and running, and the next one would come in and have an idea and may add to it, and we would just open like that. Well, I left the track up, and he came into the studio, and all of a sudden, he left some of the settings. He changed some of the settings on some of the effects racks that we had. And that's where the cymbal sound, that crazy electronic cymbal sound, that's how that came about. So those elements right there helped to build a song. But going into the legal part of the sampling, when I kept 100% of the publishing, and it's interesting you mentioned about the legal side of it. Atlantic Records also, they were responsible for putting that song out for Yes. But what I didn't know was that Atlantic Records took 50% of the publishing from Yes. And what they did was, and then they probably don't want me getting into too much of this, but on one hand, it's not a big secret. What some of these record companies do, they not only have the record label, but they have the subsidiaries are management companies, video companies, publishing companies. Now, legally, they're not supposed to do that, but they may have another silent partner or a partner who's with them. Now, you don't know if they are connected, but that may be the publishing company. In the case with Yes, it was the publishing company, and they were connected with the original CEO and owners of Atlantic. So when I didn't give them the publishing, when we inked the deal, because like I told you before, we weren't going to get the deal. The deal wasn't going to go down because I didn't want to give them any of the publishing. And the lawyers basically said it was a deal breaker, and they didn't want Atlantic to do the deal with me. And matter of fact, we were leaving the lawyer's office, and they called us back in. And when they called us back in, they said, my lawyer he put his hands over his lips, and he was telling me to be quiet. And I could hear them. They were saying, tell Kyper he could keep his effing publishing. We'll deal with him another way. And the other way that they were dealing with me was they put the record out, and it was getting so hot that the publishing company and Atlantic Records was really the ones trying to sue me. But what they did was they got in touch with Yes. Now, Trevor Horn and I forgot the other guy's name. There were two guys that wrote the song, On of a Lonely Heart. The whole band was split up. Yes band was split up at that time, suing each other at each other's throat. And I got a phone call from Trevor Horn's attorney thanking me for sampling the song. And it was just an artist thing, man. I don't know how I was grateful that this happened. Trevor Horn got on the phone and he said, Kyper, I just want to tell you thank you, man. I'm glad you sampled our song and your rap song. He said, I know a lot of these rappers are sampling songs now, and most of the artists are coming back suing them. We don't want to sue you. We're thankful that you sampled our track because now we're back together and we're doing shows.
Tic-tac-toe is a game I used to play. When I was little, I used to say, I got the X and I got the O. It don't matter when you tic-tac-toe. Now I'm a little bit bolder. I like to play just a little bit older. I like getting girls and giving the pearls and them legs across my shoulders. I love to go to the disco. See a fly girl say hello. They just look me in the eye and pass right by with that booty shaking like jello. I like to speak cause that's being nice. It makes me mad when I have to speak twice. But that's the game that girls like to play. It's just tic-tac-toe in a grown-up way. X, and O. It's like yes and no. Tic-tac-toe. X and O. Is it sex? Maybe so.
Take us through the post-Atlantic years. Was it 19? What are we talking here?
About 1993. I was officially released. I was officially off of the label in 94 because I was still recording, but they weren't putting everything out. It's kind of like I was on pause. But they put me on a subsidiary label called Turnstile. And on Turnstile, we released, I was still under Atlantic when I did Spin the Bottle. A lot of people don't know that. But there was some controversy behind that. There was still a few legal things happening. And they released it. They intended to release it internationally. But then Atlantic markets like Canada and the UK actually released it first. And then later on, if I'm not mistaken, I think MTV played it, but they didn't do a push on it like they would have done, like they did with Tic-Tac-Toe, so to speak. Somewhere between 95 and 2000, I was started doing these mix compilations, and I was still recording. So I would record tracks. At that point, I was going through some things. I think I was transitioning business-wise. I started my own business and started trying to make some investments here and there. So at that point, we were still touring. We were still doing shows, but none of us really wanted to release a full album. So what I would do back then, when the mixtape thing started, I wanted to continue to do dance music. So I started doing these dance compilations. And I think one of the series we did was called Prescription Mixes. Those got very popular. And we did them on Tip Top Records. Everything we started doing then, we got back into working the label. We got back with the distributors that initially helped us in the beginning. And I rekindled those relationships, which I never really lost them. It's just that when I went to a major label, they could no longer get product direct. I'm more of a hands-on guy. I'm very approachable. I've always been that way. Sometimes I try to avoid them having to talk to a manager or something like that. I kind of left a lot of those doors open. So when we got back with the distributors, we started out by doing the compilations, and they kept requesting that, you need to put out another album. You need to put out another album. But basically what I was doing was dropping singles onto those compilation albums with other dance music compilations that were going, really well. As a matter of fact, they put us on Fantastic Jams, Monster Booty, Monsters of Rap, which was on Razor and Tie. I mean, I jumped around on several different labels between that period. And then after 2000, from a period, say maybe 2000 to 2003, 2004, 2005, I kind of kept doing those compilations, but then I started bringing it more home towards Kyper, doing the Kyper album, but then I started doing music. I'm also a ghostwriter, so I do write for other artists. And I kind of started, when I started ghostwriting, even on the rap side, I kind of started inventing other artists names. So I do have other names that I'm doing work under in different genres of music, but there's no, there's nothing that would lead you to that. It's Kyper. My creative juices are flowing again. My ear has been to the streets. I've also connected with a younger generation. I've got a younger generation now listening. I have children, so I've got a son that just graduated high school, and matter of fact, I'm not giving him his props. He introduced me to a lot of the new school EDM, and to be honest with you, he's really, he's musically inclined. He plays the trumpet. He was in the band, and same kind of phase I went through. And he would listen to some, especially I'm bionic. He would listen to it and go, yeah, that's the new school sound and electro voice, and there's, he kind of helped me critique that. So it's kind of funny because he had to go back in time. He had to go back through the older stuff, and because for a long time, my children really didn't know. They didn't know nothing of what I did until they got old enough to surf through YouTube and go on social media. And then, yeah, I mean, it was crazy because one day my daughter comes home and she's like, "Dad, is this you?" And my, her mom was like, she said, she looked at me when she did, she said, "I told you we'll catch up with you one day." Especially that's still about her. She's like, "Is this Dad?" So, with them being the age that they are and listening to music as it is now, that I feel now that my creativity is broadened, so it allows me to create on that new school level. And since I had a neck for doing mashups as a DJ, I found my niche now to be able to mix old school with a new school and then have an appealing sound to a young audience and an old audience. And that's very difficult to do, but I think we pulled it off with I'm Bionic.
For sure. Well, Kyper, I have to tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Where can listeners of the show go out and check out your music or buy your music?
On any platform that's out there, like I said, we rekindled with our old distributors, and they kept us with like the international distributors. So I mean, iTunes, Tidal, Shazam, anywhere that you would buy or you would download music, it can be found. I'm also approachable. I mean, I have people reach out to me on social media. On Facebook, you just punch in Kyper, Kyper. There's 2 pages, and I got to thank Mark Zuckerberg because he really didn't allow a lot of people, anybody that had like artist names or whatever on Facebook. They wanted you to use your personal name, and I reached out to them directly, and they did approve for me to go ahead and just use Kyper. So that was another milestone I did as an artist. Still breaking down barriers, man. That's my thing, man. I want to do it the right way, though. So, yeah, if anybody wanted to search and reach out to me, contact me, like I said, I'm very approachable. It's Kyper. And if anywhere that you buy your music or any platforms that you use, we're usually, the music is usually there when we do a release. So we haven't found it to not be in any of them yet. So we're with good distributors. We have good digital distributors, and we also have some hard copies. We have CDs. You can reach out to us on the Kyper music page on Facebook. It's still a valuable tool, so we use it. And in any of the past CDs, we still have some in stock in the Tip Top warehouse, so we ship them out. So we're all about enjoying the music scene, man, and being thankful to the listeners.
For sure. And I think for our listeners who grew up with your music as a big part of their teenage or younger adult lives, and for the newer generation who maybe are going to discover your music for the first time after listening to this podcast, I know it'll be a pleasure for them.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure for me. And like I said, I'm always approachable. So hey, let's do it again sometime.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for yet another episode of Second Acts. Kyper. Wow, what a guy. So pumped to finally have him on the show. You know, we had about 2 hours of material from the interview that had to be edited down into 1 hour. Covered a lot of stuff, and I feel like I learned a lot about the record industry and music production. And in particular, I don't think I'll ever look at the Billboard charts the same way again. As you know, Mikey Moratini usually supplies the show with music, but I want to thank Kyper for allowing us to use his music for this special episode. As always, if you enjoy the show, be sure to stop by iTunes and leave us a review and rating. Also, join the discussion on Facebook. And remember, F. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote, "There are no second acts in American lives, but there are on Second Acts Podcast." See you next time.
So cold, electrify your soul. Get between your legs, greatest story untold. Feel the bass gon' dare ya, the boogie man gon' scare ya. Break the beat, electro heat. Call me the new seafood, 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 the new seafood.